This is a bill that we need to dispense of. Mr. Speaker, I have not seen recently this House as full as this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have whipped Mr. Speaker as a whip. Look at my numbers here, Mr. Speaker. They have never come like this, Mr. Speaker. We are NASA, we are 135, 140. Almost over 100 are here, Mr. Speaker. They have come. So, Mr. Speaker, I am seeking your indulgence. Even if suspending the House for 10 minutes, Mr. Speaker, so that we can fill this place, Mr. Speaker, let us dispense off with this bill today, Mr. Speaker, and let the 33 come here. If it is defeated by vote, that is up to them.
After a long wait, the much publicized two-thirds gender bill failed to get the requisite number to take in a vote in the National Assembly. In a move, the sponsor of the bill and leader of Majority, Aiden Duale, said was meant to save the life of the bill. The House resolved to postpone the vote to February next year. The exact date of the vote will be decided next week by the House Business Committee, but as it appears, all is not well with the bill. We've had a number of members of Parliament there voice their frustrations. In studio for more on this conversation, we have lawyer Kibe Mungai as well as Jean-Paul Murunga. He is a women's voice in this conversation. He's a programs officer at Equality Now. Jean, let me begin with you and pick up from where Kibe left off. His critique with this bill is that if the Constitution, his critique rather is that the Parliament can implement the two-thirds gender bill without increasing the size of Parliament. This again coming at a time when the country is dealing with a soaring wage bill. Talk to us about this.
I disagree with that respectfully, because when we talk of the soaring wage bill, there's a lot going on. For instance, our debts are maturing and we are still borrowing to pay those debts. Then it means these debts are contractual obligations we have with people from outside. Yet the contractual obligation we have with our own selves in the Constitution, we are not willing to comply with. So then that is hypocrisy, and that is not true. And then on the issue of political goodwill, just to elaborate a little bit, when my senior learned colleague Kibe said that it may take even less than 2 weeks to pass it if the political heads or the leadership of the political parties agree to this, then basically it goes to show that actually that political goodwill is what is not there, because if it were there, then even this bill would have passed. It wouldn't have come all this way. It would have passed long time ago. For instance, if you look at during the debates of the finance bill, look at the debates during the security amendment laws bill, look at the debate during the election laws amendment bills, you saw what threats were being issued to members of parliament from their respective parties if they don't comply. And we are wondering now that in this particular case, they are not complying. They are saying that they have a position as parties and they agree to support the bill, yet they don't come to the floor of the House, yet no action is being taken. Then this goes to show how unserious they are with this matter. And we are sure that the Kenyan electorates are watching, because the other way that this provision can be enacted, which again nobody is talking about, is that the electorate themselves, if they feel that this is an expensive affair, then let them comply with the Constitution at the election point. Let them elect the leaders according to the Constitution by ensuring that in their constituencies, in their counties, they elect leaders who conform to the Constitution, knowing that the threshold that no any gender should go beyond the two-thirds rule. If they feel that this is a more expensive affair of increasing the members in parliament, then let's do that. But you see, that is not what the electorates have done, and that's why we are correcting this fault. So it should not be too expensive for Kenyans, because there are many other things we are still undertaking as a country. There are new projects we are undertaking, and yet nobody's talking about it. There's corruption going on. There's money wasted in so many other areas. Yet this is the only issue which is being singled out at this particular moment. So I think it will be very unfair for that argument to be raised at this particular moment.
All right, a cost notwithstanding, it's not a matter of just doing it because it's a constitutional requirement. We also have the need to do it right. Do the contents of this bill ensure sustainable gains made with regard to gender parity in the country? Because taking a look at some of the critiques here, Kibe Mungai there being one of them, he says if the Constitution allows political parties to achieve gender principle through nominations, then there'll be no incentive whatsoever to nominate the relatively weaker female politicians to contest for elective seats, which means at the end of the day, the weaker female politicians will be locked out and only the elite politicians will benefit from these positions.
I think there we are usurping powers which do not belong to us, because the role of parliament in this particular case is to enact a legislation. Then, looking at the procedural provisions for nominating members and proposing names to the IEBC is upon the electoral process. And that electoral process has a different law altogether. It has different institutions. And we have credible institutions. We have the Political Parties Tribunal, which actually should...
We've already seen the nature of nominations from political parties year in, year out in the country.
Come again, please.
We've already seen the nature of nominations in our political parties. Democracy, when it comes to our political parties, has been at question historically in all the elections that we've seen in the country. Are these the institutions you have trust in to ensure fair nomination in the gender representation?
These are institutions which we created as a country, as a nation, and we need to strengthen them so that they are able to observe the process and ensure that the process conforms to the law. For instance, look at the ruling when Honorable Justice Maraga made the ruling on the presidential election. Nobody expected that, but that's an institution which we created within the constitution as a Kenyan nation. Right. And therefore, we should not be afraid that our institutions make mistakes, and that's why we are here to correct the mistakes. And this particular bill is out to correct a mistake which has happened in the past. So then, I wouldn't judge those institutions before they carry out their mandate. So it is the role of the parliament to pass the legislation. Then when it comes to nomination, we have institutions which should ensure that each and every political party conforms to the set down rules and principles.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Kibe, should the bill become law, you seem to think that there's a greater likelihood that the share of elected women members of parliament will actually reduce dramatically as early as 2022. Why is that?
The reason is simple, that if you require political parties that and you limit or restrict their right on whom they can nominate, for example, you require them that in every county you must meet the gender quota, it would effectively mean that they would give you the numbers that you want. It is a restriction on political parties. But now, if you leave it to the kind of scenario that you have, that the political parties can nominate anybody who is there, the argument you are hearing being made that, for example, the male candidate, we are weaker. The admission that you are weaker and you don't have money effectively means, why should a political party go for a candidate who does not even have money? And when there is a candidate who has the money both to fund the political party and to fund his campaigns, they would obviously go for the stronger candidate. And therefore, elective seats will go to the male candidates. Because the women, if you create the loophole that you can put them on the party list, then the compliance would be on the party list. And remember, the dual bill itself says this is for 20 years and can be increased by another maximum of 10 years. So that within these 30 years and beginning from 2022, you are going to have a situations where you have fewer and fewer actually elected women, and you comply with the 2/3 gender principle using nominations. Right. And let us remember that this so-called principle is actually not a principle of democracy. It is just a principle of of modern democracy, in which lobby groups, like strong lobby groups like those ones of women, they decide to stake a claim on the table and saying like there is something wrong in a parliament where all genders are not there. But the Americans, the French and other people, they do not have nominated members. Right. Nobody can say Germany or America is not a democracy because they do not have nominated members. So that this creation of nominated members, let us agree, it is an anomaly to democracy. We are just trying to expand democracy to ensure that we have very many people at the high table. Right. And having many people at the high table is not similar to democracy. And therefore, you would have more women. Personally, I'm in favor of a position whereby you try and ensure that you have got more women actually being elected, because you need to listen to the people. In all the votes that you have seen carried out, wananchi being asked questions, do you want these seats? They are saying by a margin of about 80% to 20%. We do not want them. These were not demands of the people. These were demands of lobby group. The fact that they are in the constitution today does not mean they cannot be removed tomorrow. And they will be removed tomorrow if you end up having so many nominated women members.
Right,
and that's granted.
And like we mentioned, Jean is the voice of the women tonight. Before we get to him, the question we're probing tonight is, was the vote on the gender bill deferred because the House did not have a requisite number to vote, or were there other underlying factors? Kikuyu Member of Parliament Kimani Ichung'wah says the deferral creates a window for a constitutional amendment to expand the gender rule requirement for elective posts. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
Many of us who are in this House supporting this bill because it is what is required by our Constitution of 2010, Honorable Speaker. And maybe, Honorable Speaker, you could also guide us. Because earlier this morning, I had a very animated conversation with my friend and colleague, nominated member 001, Honorable Sankok. Because of sentiments I read and heard about that he had expressed. And I was encouraging Honorable Speaker that probably he has an opportunity now to also bring another constitutional amendment bill to amend the particular provision of the Constitution that creates the 2/3 gender rule, to exempt elective positions from the 2/3 gender requirement.
All right, that is some of the members of Parliament there. Jean, let me give you the closing comment in this conversation. Let's begin first with what Kibe Mungai had to say. He seems to think what is contained in this bill, first of all, is not the voice of the people, not even the voice of the women, but the voice of the lobby groups. Make it clear for us, where do women stand in this conversation?
It is very clear that Kenyans spoke during the referendum for the Constitution, and that's where the Constitution passed. And this was in the Constitution, and it was not hidden. It is something which was discussed extensively. That is number one. Number two, when we say that the people out there are saying they don't want the bill, that is not true, because no evidence has been tabled to show that. And the Parliament is mandated to carry out public participation. Right. And if this were the case, then this bill would not have been even presented in the floor of the House, because then it wouldn't be representative of the Kenyan voices. And then number three is that when you look at the current Parliament, we have women who are elected, around 16. Then we have those who are nominated. It doesn't mean that when women are nominated, there are no other women who will vie for the elective positions. We have women governors. We have women-nominated senators. So then that should not be the premise on which we shoot down this bill, that just by the fact that a number of women will be nominated, then it means any other woman will stand up. Remember, most of these women who are now elected, most of them stood first under nomination. They were nominated. Then from that, they went on to the elective positions competitively. So then that premise really does not hold a lot of water. Then when you look at finally the issue of when we talk about saying that the political goodwill is missing. Look at the cabinet, for instance, at the moment. Right. Then you realize that out there somebody might be speaking differently than what really they have in their heart when they come to the House. Look at when we talk of the two major political parties, that is now the one led by Honorable Raila Odinga and then the other Jubilee Party. If they agree really that they want to pass this bill, then as Kibe Mungai says, that will take less than 2 weeks. But it is because there is no internal commitment into it. If there was internal commitment, and if they meant what they say out there in the political rallies, then I'm sure this bill will not be going far the way it is, going left, right, and center. And then you hear even some of the comments by the members of Parliament, for example, Honorable Junet, when he says that if he doesn't get 233 majority, then up to them. Then up to who? Then it means they're not owning this bill. That is the bottom line.
All right. And at the end of the day, I mean, looking at what happened in the proceedings of the National Assembly today, and even historically at other sittings of the gender bill, it's quite clear that the problem is not really the requisite numbers, because while there might have been a quorum hitch within the parliamentary chambers, the rest of the members of Parliament were right outside the chambers. It's not that they were absent, they were right there. And listening to what Kimani Ichung'wah there has to say, many of them support this bill because it is a constitutional requirement, not because of what is contained in the bill. The main bone of contention is the issue of elective positions being up for grabs. Many say this is not in line with democracy.
Let me say two things in closing. Number one is that the time that now we have, the 3 months, I hope, and I will try as much as I can, that together with other men and women of goodwill, we try for the first time to put legislative mechanism that the Constitution actually requires to provide for a methodology on how you can achieve the 2/3 gender principle without increasing the number of seats.
Right.
I'll try the best I can to do that. Number two, the provision of the Constitution that requires the addition of these seats does not only require the increase of the Parliament or those type of jobs. It is also important that as we wait for February, let us look at all the counties. Let us ensure 1/3 of the chiefs are women, 1/3 of the OCS and OCPDs, and these categories of workers. And I believe if you are to do that, there would be so many happy families in Kenya, not just in Nairobi, but across the country. And therefore, let us remember the principle we are trying to put in place applies across the board, not just when it comes to Parliament. So let us have equal force by people like Honorable Millie, Honorable Alice Wahome, and others to ensure that this fight for equality is not just at the high table. Even all these other places are the grassroots. Let us have this equality.
All right. Lawyer Kibe Mwingai, who also in studio with us is John Paul Murunga, who is a programs officer at Equality Now. Many thanks for joining us on The Big Story tonight. My name is Michelle Ngele Odhiambo. Many thanks for watching. Good evening.